Alright, so to set up your document for today, in Illustrator we're going to make a new one. Since we're doing 3 different bar graphs, we're going to put them on 3 separate artboards. Wow, really is going slow. I apologize. There we go. Under New Document, 3 different artboards. As far as the size of them, I'm going to keep them letter size, and I've set my orientation to be landscape. You can fit these on a vertical, but landscape tends to work out a little bit better. We'll say OK to this, and these are the 3 artboards that we'll work on. 1 for each one. Let's see if it'll wake up now. The first one I'll put on the first artboard. The tool that I'm going to use in order to create this, if you look in your toolbox, is on the bottom right hand corner. If I click and hold, go away. If I click and hold, I've got a variety of different chart tools that I can work with. Illustrator can do more than just one particular type of bar graph or column graph. It can do pie charts and scatter charts. It can take a lot of different data and visualize it differently. For these examples and exercises, I'm only going to be working with the column graph tool. Notice that this is different from the CC charts tool. I'm not going to use this one, just the column graph tool for each one of these. To create any kind of graph in Illustrator, once you got the tool selected, first thing you'll do is click once, and it'll ask for a size to work with. Come on. Oh. Computer's deciding to act slow and dumb today. Let me undo what I just did. Clicking once, don't click and drag. There we go. I need to set up a size of it. And our size for each one is going to be 6 inches wide and 4 1/4, 4 1/2 by tall. There we go. And you can see what it looks like. It'll, by default, generate a simple chart. The second thing that's going to open up, this is your data set that we can paste your information into. It works just like a regular Excel spreadsheet. If I type numbers in for each of the columns, so if I just gave it some random data, and I hit the check mark, notice I've got a variety of different options over here to apply. It will apply that information to here and it'll update my chart automatically. Notice what happens when I place it in all the columns. Another option, if you accidentally place it in each of the rows, this second button will transpose both of those numbers. Notice what it did? When I hit apply, it'll re-up my numbers. What's the difference did you see between those two? This is in rows versus columns. What main difference did you see? What's different between this chart that's got all the information in a row and this chart that's got all the information in the columns?
Colors.
The colors, bingo. Pay attention to this. If everything is in a different column, it's picking up as a different data set. In other words, it's seeing this is one thing, another, even though there's no labels on it. If you put everything in the same column, it's the same color because it's thinking it's the same set of information. You'll see this actually play out when we put some real data into what we have. Other things you can do, you can import data directly from it. We're just going to copy and paste with what we have. And you can also change up the styling of each of the cells. Once you've finished, you've got your data set. Everything's going to be grouped together. And you can actually update this a little bit later. If you do need to bring up more options for this, you can hold down Control and click on it. Come on, there we go. And some of the options is to change the type of graph we're doing, change up the data and the design, and we'll get into the rest of these. If I clicked on data, it'll bring up my spreadsheet and I can change up the numbers and update as necessary from there. Click OK, there's the numbers updated. Alright, so let's actually create a data set from what we have. For the first one, it's going to be the US averages or the averages of different temperatures. There we are. So temperature average. Notice I've got January, the months on one side, and highs and lows. We'll copy it, Command-C, Jump back into Illustrator. Click once. We'll keep it the same size. And I'm just going to paste my information directly into here. When I click check mark, notice now what I have. What's different? Yeah, what is this on the side? Key. You got a key. It's telling you the highs and the lows, and also down at the bottom, you've got your individual months. Illustrator will recognize what information that you've placed and what it should be as a label in itself. Okay, once I've done this, I don't need my spreadsheet anymore. Let's go through and show you how to customize the look and feel of each one of these. First thing, if I wanted my lines to extend all the way out, or even if I wanted to change up the kind of chart that I have, Control click on it, and I can open up Type. That'll give me my graph type options. The first one up here is I can change what kind of graph it is, so if I needed it to be a line or a bar or something else, I can say OK to that, and it'll take the data and it'll turn it into a different type of graph that we're working with. In our case, we still want to keep it as a bar chart and say OK. Other things you can do with the type is you can change up the column width. So if I wanted these to be a little bit wider or more narrow, I can change these up. Say I type the column width to be 120%. You can see now they got a lot thicker and actually overlapping. We'll get into those for another bar chart. The final thing that's a common thing to choose, instead of just the graph options, you can also give options for each of the axes that we're working on. So the value axis, in other words, the left-hand side. Notice the length of my tick marks is just really short. If I wanted it to go the full width, and I said OK, it would give me options that look like this. The main thing to remember is if I needed to change that up, that's one way of doing it. Since everything is grouped together, if I wanted to change the type that's down at the bottom, or really type anywhere, I need to use my white arrow, direct selection tool, to select those particular sets of data. Once it's selected, then I get the options to be able to change up my font size, making it larger or smaller, or even choosing a different font that will fit in there as well. On here, notice that they're still kind of running together. What are some ways that you could think of to make things fit in here? If you had to change up this data. You could rotate them. If you did want to rotate it, you'd have to select them individually. You can use your rotate tool, which is up here, and then just select it and rotate it to be whatever rotation you want it to be. That's one way of doing it. Any other way?
Abbreviation.
You could do abbreviation. In this case, you would just use your type tool, select the type that you want, and make it a lot smaller that way. There's lots of different options to do. One thing that I suggested is to select every other one. Make sure you got through right. Select every other one and stagger the location of them. Bring those down and keep the other ones up. The main thing is you want to be able to see your data and actually change it up. And use your direct selection tool to be able to select those. If I wanted to change the color of each individual bar, here's where it gets a little bit tricky, or I'm going to show you a different tool to make it easy. I could select each individual bar and then go over to my swatches and change those up as well. This would be very tedious if I had a lot of information. There's a tool under your direct selection tool called your group selection tool. With this tool, it allows you to select all your sets of data that are grouped together. Right now, my highs, my black bars, are all grouped together. So if I clicked once on high, and then clicked again, notice now it quickly selected all of the black ones. And once they're all selected, it's simply a matter of choosing all of them at once. If I clicked once, twice, 3 times, you can see it's selecting more and more stuff within that group. And so I just need to select until I get exactly what I want. Let's do the same thing for the lows. Once, twice, get all my lows selected, and then it's a matter of choosing a blue to change up that particular data set. Pretty cool? Again, anytime if I need to update this data, I can hold down Control, change the data, change the type, and Illustrator will automatically update it from here. What I'm going to require of you once you've created your data set is to do any type of design that you want to with it. Feel free to change up the fonts, give it a title. You can play around with backgrounds if you want to. Any questions on that? That's the basic introduction. We're about to get more fancy with our bar charts for the next one. Let's say I wanted something a little bit more custom than just a regular bar. For the second one, we're going to be using the data set for the Common Core assessment. And so this is for educational Common Core testing. I've got the Mississippi and the US averages, so I'll copy that over and see. Grab my graph tool, let's make a new one, and paste in my data. So this is what I have for this one. We'll close it out. Since this is dealing with schools and how schools rate amongst each other, I would like for my bars not to be just a solid bar, rectangular bar. I want it to look a little fancy and be actual a pencil tool or a pencil icon that I created. So I'm going to open up my pencils EPS. This is one of the things that I'm giving you. I would like to use this as my graphic for the graph that I created. I'm going to copy them over, Command-C, paste. All I need them is to be inside of my document. And I want to replace each image to represent one or the other set of data. I'll start off with the red one. With it selected, I'm going to define this as a column design. You can go to Object, down to Graph, and here I can change up the design of a graph. With Design selected, we'll choose New Design. Notice since I had it selected, that's what's loaded up, and I can give it a new name. So this one will be Mississippi. Say OK. Do the same thing for US averages. Select it, Object, down to Graph. It's where we can set up the design. And rename that as US average. And say OK as well. Now to apply it. Again, I'm going to use my group tool and let's select all of the Mississippi set of data. Back under the graph design, I can open up the column information. This is where I'll define the graph column and how it looks. Since I'm doing Mississippi, we'll select it. And I've got a little bit of different column types that I can place these in. If I did vertically scaled, here's what it would look like. So it replaces that with the actual bit of data. Pretty cool, right? What's the issue, however, with this, especially with these longer ones? They look different. They look stretched out and distorted. What I would like to do, and I thought this would be cool, since my data is in sets of 50, so increments of 50, have the height of each one represent 50 students or 50 whatever data. So let's reselect it again. I'm going to click once, twice, 3 times this time to get everything on there. Under Graph Column, instead of it scaling vertically, we're going to repeat over and over again. This time we can tell it how many units to repeat over. So in this case, 50 units. I do have it to be scaled or to chop. I'll keep it at scaled and show you what this looks like. And now I've got that as my data. Pretty cool? So each one represents 50 students, or 50 as the score. Let's do the same thing for the US. What did it do for the top here, however? It scaled it. So the last little bits of information will be scaled to be appropriately. For the US average, if I was to select it, we'll do the same thing. Under Graph, Column, we're going to repeat it every 50 units. Instead of scaling, I'll do chopped design. The difference between those two is that it would look like this. It does the same thing, but you can see the last little bit gets chopped off. And so it will give you just a proportional bit of that. So I've got this that's custom defined for the graph that I have. Again, the last thing that I'm going to leave up to you is the design of the lettering and the design of the background and the title for this particular one. All cool? Any questions on this? Okay, real simple. Last thing. For this one, we're going to use the tree average height. Yeah, tree height. Copy the data over. Make our graph. And paste it in. Alright, so I've got different size of trees. Let me put this back to 100%. I'm going to open up my type. There we go. For this one, I've got different sizes of trees, and I want to be able to showcase what each tree will look like for each size. To do this, I want it to show a little tree as my icon. Select it, copy it, paste it into here. We'll keep it at this size. As far as the height goes, there's a couple of ways I could do it. I could stretch it out to be a certain size this way. It's going to give me some issues because some of them are taller than others, but not necessarily wider, and I'll show you what that looks like. What I would like to do is to have this represent the height and then have my trunk be the rest of the height for it. Here's how we're going to do it. It's a bit of a magic trick. We'll zoom in. I need to set a guideline at my trunk where I want to stretch my data. To do this, I'll use my line segment. We'll set my fill and stroke to none. And I'm just going to draw a straight line just under the branches. Do y'all remember how to create a custom guide? We did this for the custom angular and diagonal grids that we created. Draw off a guide. You can go up to View, down to Guides, and you can actually choose Make Guide. Notice now I've got my blue bar on top of it. Here's another thing that may trip you up, and I don't have this on the example, the handout that I gave you. You need to be able to select your guide. Notice that I can select it and move it. If you go to Guides and Lock Guides is checked off, then you're not able to select it. So you need to make sure Guides is unlocked so that when you select it, you can do this. Now, I can select everything from here, got my guide as well, and we'll define it as a design. Make a new one, rename it Tree. Say OK. And let's apply it to what we have here. Select my black, go to my graph, column, we'll choose a tree. Again, if I did vertically scaled, this is what it would look like. Nice and stretched out. The lower ones look okay, but once it gets larger, no good. If I did, let's reselect again. Vertically or uniformly scaled. This is where it will keep everything proportionally larger, but then it would look something like this. Again, it's not giving me the correct type of data that I want. I don't want to show trees as being larger, bigger, just taller. So for this one, we want it to be stretched out. Under Tree. This is a sliding column type. When I say OK, this is what it gives me. Sliding column will keep your tree, at least the top of it, proportional, and the trunk will go all the way down. Notice that it will proportionally slide right where I place my column guide into there. So that's why it's important to place it right under there. If you don't have it at all, or if you have it somewhere else, it'll pick up on those pixels and it'll actually look like you're streaking the tree all the way down. It gives you a really interesting error. These still look like palm trees, so this is where I may want to go back in and make them a little bit thicker to look a little bit better or more proportional. I can select my column type, graph type, set my column to be 120. Now they're getting a little bit larger, maybe even larger than this. Oops, select it. Oh, let's get wild. Let's do 180. You can see some of the issues that come up with this, but it does make it a lot larger from there. Again, last thing you need to do is to change up your formatting for your type and also everything else from there. All cool? Any questions? Ideas? Concerns? All right. I'm going to upload this to Moodle and let y'all get started. About halfway through class, I'm going to stop everyone and look at your information that you have for the